I never kissed him, not once, not in 50 years, and that's what made it love. My name is Astrid Nielsen. I'm 60 years old. I live in a small yellow house on Store Kongensgate 58, one of the historic Nyboder row houses built for naval officers centuries ago, painted the color of sunlit butter with black shutters and a brass knocker shaped like an anchor. From my window, I can see the spire of Holmen Church, hear the distant cry of gulls over the Øresund, smell salt and rain and the faintest trace of elderflower in spring. For 23 years, I was married to Henrik, a good man, a kind man, a man who believed love was shown in actions, not words. He fixed the leak in the kitchen ceiling 3 times, remembered to buy rye bread every Friday, held my hand during thunderstorms, even though he wasn't afraid, just because he knew I was. He was safety. He was certainty. He was the quiet harbor I sailed into after years of believing I needed to be a storm. But he was never fire. That belonged to Elias. We met at the University of Copenhagen in the autumn of 1984. I was 18. Wild-haired, poetry-obsessed, convinced life was meant to be lived in bold ink and midnight confessions under street lamps in Nørrebro. Henrik was in my economics seminar, quiet, precise, always 3 pages ahead in the textbook, his notes so neat they looked printed. Elias? He was in the art studio across the hall, barefoot in winter, arguing with professors about whether color had a soul. We collided one rainy afternoon in the library. I dropped my copy of Sonnets to Orpheus. He caught it before it hit the floor, looked up, and held my gaze like he'd been waiting for me his whole life. "You read Rilke?" he asked, voice rough like unvarnished wood. "I breathe him," I said. He laughed. A sound like waves breaking on Skagen's shore, and just like that, I was lost. We spent that winter wrapped in scarves and secrets, walking along Sortedam Sø, sharing one cigarette, reciting Neruda in broken Danish. He kissed me under the chestnut trees in Ørstedsparken during a snowfall so soft it felt like the sky was apologizing, said my name like it was a vow. Told me I was a storm in silk, fierce but gentle where it mattered. I believed we'd run away together, to Berlin, to Lisbon, to anywhere the wind took us. He'd paint, I'd write. We'd live in a garret with thin walls and thick dreams. But then my father lost his job at the shipyard. My mother sat me down with tea gone cold and said, "Passion doesn't pay the dentist, Astrid. It doesn't keep the lights on." And Henrik asked me to dinner. Just dinner. No grand gesture, no poetry, just, "Would you like to try that new Smørrebrød place near Nørreport? I hear their herring is excellent." I said yes, not because my heart leapt, but because my hands were tired of shaking, because I wanted, just once, to be still. When I told Elias, he didn't beg, didn't rage. He stood very still in the rain outside my dorm on Jagvej, hands buried in the pockets of his paint-stained coat, and said softly, "If he makes you happy, I'll step back. But I won't disappear. I'll be here if you ever need to remember who you were before you chose safety." Then he turned and walked away. Not dramatically, just gone. 3 months later, Henrik proposed on a bench in Kongens Have with a simple gold band and a promise. "I'll never let you fall." We married in June 1987. Sunshine, white roses, my mother crying quietly into her handkerchief. Elias came to the wedding, stood in the back, near the linden trees, smiled when the photos were taken, genuine, not forced. Gave us a painting as a gift, a seascape of Skagen at dawn, all blues and golds, with two tiny figures on the shore, facing the horizon, not each other. He signed it on the back, in pencil, "For the ones who stay." I cried when I saw it. Henrik thought it was joy. It wasn't. Over the decades, Elias became part of our lives, not as a ghost, not as a threat, but as family. Henrik's closest friend, our daughter Lena's honorary uncle, the man who showed up with soup when I had the flu, who helped Henrik build Lean's treehouse, who sat with us through her teenage heartbreaks over cheap wine and better advice. He never flirted, never lingered too long when he hugged me, never called after 10 p.m., even when I wished he would. He never married. When I once asked why, over coffee in our kitchen, steam rising from our mugs, he stirred his cup slowly, eyes on the Nyboder rooftops outside, and said, "Some loves are like lighthouses, Astrid. They don't pull ships in. They just help them not crash." I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Henrik never suspected a thing. Why would he? Elias loved him too, in his own quiet way. They'd watch football matches, argue about tax policy, go fishing in Roskilde Fjord at dawn, and I'd watch them. Two men bound by loyalty, one of them loving the other's wife in silence for 40 years. Was it noble, or was it slow suicide? I didn't know. I only knew that every time Elias looked at me, really looked, he saw the girl who once believed storms were beautiful, and for a moment, I remembered her too. Then, on my 60th birthday, Henrik died. Not slowly, not peacefully, a heart attack in the garden, while pruning the roses he'd planted for our 25th anniversary. One minute he was humming an old Kim Larson song. The next, gone, just like that. The world kept turning, but I swear the light dimmed. The funeral was gray, rain falling softly on a Sistan cemetery, soaking the shoulders of black coats. Line held my hand so tightly I thought my bones would crack. And there, standing slightly apart beneath a dripping linden tree, was Elias. Same paint-stained coat, same quiet eyes, now lined with 60 years of restraint. After the last guest left, he walked over. Didn't say, "I'm sorry." Didn't offer empty comfort. He handed me a sealed envelope, cream paper, my name written in his familiar slanting script. The same hand that once wrote me poems on napkins in cafes. "Read it when you're ready," he said. Then he turned and walked away, just like in 1985. I waited until midnight, sat by the window, watching the streetlights glow on wet cobblestones, the Nyboder houses silent and golden in the dark. Opened it. Inside, just 3 lines. "I kept my promise, to love you enough to let you go. But I need you to know I never stopped, not for a single day." I pressed the paper to my chest and sobbed, not just for Henrik, but for the life I didn't live, for the love I buried to be good, for the man who honored my marriage more than I ever honored my own heart. Weeks passed. Spring came early to Copenhagen. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the canal, pink confetti on the breeze. Elias didn't call, didn't visit, respected my grief like it was sacred. But one afternoon, I found a small canvas leaning against my door. No note, just a painting. Me sitting on our bench in Kongens Hav, sunlight in my silver-streaked hair, eyes closed, finally at peace. On the back in pencil, "You deserve to be seen, even now." That night I called him, not to confess, not to rush, just to say, "Thank you for remembering me." His voice cracked. "Astrid, I never forgot." Now? We meet for tea on Sundays at Café Dybdahl. Walk along the harbor past the old ships. Talk about books, memories, the way the light hits the water in late afternoon. No declarations, no urgency, just presence. People will say it's wrong, that I'm betraying Henrik's memory, that love like this should have stayed buried. But here's what they don't understand. Elias didn't wait for me to become available. He waited for me to become free. And Henrik? He gave me stability, a home, a daughter who is my greatest joy. But Elias gave me back myself. Is it betrayal to choose happiness with the man who loved me enough to lose me? Or is it the final act of honesty, to stop pretending you don't see the person who's been seeing you all along? I don't have answers, only this. At 60, I'm learning that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet hand that never reaches, but never lets go. If you've ever loved someone in silence, if you've chosen duty over desire, if you've spent decades being good while your heart whispered another name, know this: your heart remembers, even when you pretend it doesn't. And maybe that's okay. Subscribe if you believe some loves aren't meant to burn, but to endure.